I built a business that I was a slave to, and I was completely unhappy. What I find is that the results, the outcome is wildly different just by shifting the energy. I always have to check in and be like, where am I coming from? You're the version of yourself who makes quick decisions, takes the action. Your energy is going to determine whether you're going to take care of your body. It has nothing to do with how much you meditate and visualize. The most important spiritual practice is to actually live.
Welcome to the Self-Aware Leader Podcast, where we tap into transforming leadership. Today, we have Dr. Nona Djavid. She is the powerhouse behind Elevate, from escaping a suppressed upbringing to building million-dollar businesses as a chiropractor and a coach. We're going to get into that, guys, in a life of health, wealth, and connection. Let's dive and elevate your potential. Thank you, Dr. Nona, for being on today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And you did a fantastic job with my last name.
Obviously, you were born and you immigrated to the U.S. and you started high school with limited English. What was when you first started? Here you are, 16, you just came here. What was that like? Can you walk us through the bullying and the suppression and the poverty that you had?
Oh, yeah. So I moved to the United States. I was 16 years old. And when we lived in Iran, which is where we migrated from, and I moved here with my family. When we moved here in Iran, we would be considered, say, middle class, like living a comfortable life and everything else. And my parents just kind of, sold their entire life, and they brought all of their life savings to the United States. The minute we arrived, we were immediately below poverty line because of exchange, right? So it didn't really mean anything if it was their entire life savings. We ended up in a tiny little place, and all of us kind of living in a room. And I think that was a really pivotal time in my life, because not only because that was my first experience of scarcity, if you would, of like really being afraid of, are we going to make it? What's going to happen? But at the same time, I was thrown into high school 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks. The jet lag, I think, was still there. Into high school, they evaluated all of my paperwork and the classes that I'd taken. And they were like, you also get to skip a year. So here I am, 16 years old, senior in high school, and barely speak a word of English. I'm already not fitting in because the way I look, what my name looks like, what I dress like, and then add on top of it all the other components. I also think, as much of the struggle as it was also such an important time in who I ended up becoming for so many reasons. And one of them being that I learned that there was nothing wrong with sink or swim in that situation, because I had to learn the language, communicate. I had to get out of the city we were in. We were sort of in the central California area. I was not a fan of. I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to go big city. I want to do big things. And that really pushed me to pick up English fairly quickly. I think I'm doing okay. I ended up going to Berkeley and get my doctorate. And I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I think partly also because I had to learn how to make money. I had my first business when I was 16, when I first moved here. So it was really instrumental in everything that I teach and who I am today.
I think, when you're that age too, I could imagine, were you entrepreneurial then? Was there kind of like this, like, F it, I'm going to do this. This is who I am. Was there a resilience? Did you have that? Or were you pretty fragile then?
I feel like, looking back now, my parents were teachers and professors at the university. So we had no business owners. I'm the first business owner in probably my entire lineage. I don't think any of my ancestors back were business owners. And it was a little bit frowned upon to be entrepreneurial. But I'll tell you, when I was 16 years old, it wasn't really all that like, oh my gosh, like I had grit and I had resilience. It was more like, I'm a 16-year-old girl, and one of the only ways I could fit into this situation after the culture shock is like, I want to dress like all these other girls. I want to fit in. Really, that's where it came from. It came from a place of scarcity. It honestly came from a place of not enoughness. I felt like I wasn't enough to fit in. And so I was like, one of the ways I could do that, because my parents couldn't give me the money to fit in. So then I was like, I'm going to start to make money. Well, I'm good at math. So what am I going to do? I started teaching and tutoring math. And then I started to leverage other kids that were good at math to teach the little kids math, and then I would take a cut. And so I learned business through really like needing to fit in and needing to sort of get that validation, I think, originally. Over time, it shifted.
Do you think the fear and the scarcity, I know evolutionary ecology, that's in all of us, but that fear and scarcity that you experienced, did it put a timestamp on you enough to where you had to work through it? Because I know the not enough. A lot of leaders I talk to, that really motivates them. It's kind of like trash fuel. In your car, it's like cheap fuel. It motivates, but it stalls out the engine eventually. And a lot of people have this belief that they're not good enough. Did that develop then, or did you kind of feel like you've always had that?
I think you called it. I ran on that fuel. I love how you called it the trash fuel, because that's such perfect expression of what I experienced. And I think what a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs, small business owners experience. I ran on trash fuel for a while. I mean, that's how I got through Berkeley. That's how I got through my doctorate degree. That's how I got through the continuation of the tutoring business. And then when I opened up my very first business, I carried on this trash fuel, like you call it. And I did everything I was supposed to do. I bought into the hustle and I bought into this business. And within the first 3 years of business, this is me in my early 20s, I built a near 7-figure business with 13 employees. It was doing fantastic for like a solo practitioner business. And then I remember I completely burnt out in the process. And that was the next pivotal moment where I was like, okay, running on trash fuel or running on not enoughness and wanting to get the validation or wanting to prove myself right or wanting to also check the boxes of what the world would tell you this is successful, like get married, get a college degree, open up a business, make money, look successful. And yet here I was completely broken, and I built a business that I was a slave to, and I was completely unhappy. And that is another pivotal moment where I recognized that trash fuel was no longer going to work.
And that's where you began to, you had built the resilience up, but you began to kind of look at mindset as a tool for transformation and beliefs. Is that when that began to kind of the dark night of the soul? Obviously, you're at this point, almost 7-figure business, you have all these employees. Now you're burnt out. Is that where you began to kind of alchemize things, or?
That's a great question. I think I was really into mindset even before that period of time. Like even when I built my first business, prior to that, I'm like into Tony Robbins and reading the books and, Think and Grow Rich. All the mindset stuff has always really been.
So you could be good enough.
So I could be good. Exactly.
Right,
It was not so much the mindset itself or like going rah-rah seminars, but it was how I felt and the approach. And now I have language around it because now I call that feeling the energetic of a business or the energetic of a person. Like you could be doing the same kinds of things. Like you could have 10 things on your list for your business where you want to scale it or you want to duplicate it or you want to exit out of this business. You have 10 things that you need to do between now and 5 years from now. 10 big goals. And you could accomplish all of those things. You could do it with the energy of scarcity. You could do the same things on your list with the energy of abundance or service or love. And what I find is that the results, the outcome is wildly different just by shifting the energy. So mindset existed, but the energetics behind it were completely different.
Do you feel like it was still kind of trying to prove to the 16-year-old that fear that you had with the scarcity? Was it just constantly trying to prove something to yourself?
Looking back, I see it that way. Like when I was in it, I was like, no, I'm an A+ student. This is what
Right.
I operate. But now looking back, and unfortunately, I have to say, I wish it was proving to myself, but I think there was a lot of external validation that I was seeking at the time. And I think, I often say entrepreneurs have a trauma mostly in the back.
Yes.
Why we become entrepreneurs, right? So for me, I was really seeking a lot of validation. I can't say that even right now, that I do things without validation. I mean, I run a whole mastermind. I put on retreats. I write books and things like that. And I always have to check in and be like, where am I coming from in creating content? Where am I coming from in, in working with my members or with my students. So that's always that I feel like it's going to pop up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It always does. It's kind of like, what's my intention, on this, and then what are the emotions and the feelings that are wrapping around it, and then does my soul align with this? I understand that. And I want to, because I feel you have a lot of language under quantum leaps. And I feel like a lot of people have heard that, and entrepreneurs may look at it as kind of, and this is a spiritual podcast, so we are woo woo, if you want to say it. There's a better way to explain it. And I know you do a really good job on it. It's kind of this rapid transformation based off of realizations of who you are and what you want to accomplish. Can you kind of get into the quantum leap and shifting frequencies?
Yes. Okay. So the actual definition of a quantum jump, like in quantum physics, is when a particle goes from one layer to another layer, right? Some of us remember this probably from high school physics, maybe. The particle goes from one layer to the next layer. But if you really look into what it entails for the particle to jump into the next layer, and this is where the verbiage comes from, it does not require the particle to work. So the particle is not creating any more movement or working harder. What it is, it's a shift in the energetic state of the particle, right? So if you take that definition, and I think that word gets thrown around quite often, the quantum leap your life, a quantum leap, at least in the spaces that we're in, right? But I think if you take that and if you apply it to just what we are talking about, say growing a business and even your relationship, even your life, the way that you live life, and you go, okay, if I shift the energetic state in which I'm in, meaning, and this from my neurology background, I can tell you that there's sort of this energy body that exists, right? Our nervous system is literally an electromagnetic field. So we have this energetic field, and if we're filling it up with the scarcity and with the not enoughness and am I good enough and looking for the validation, then typically the results that you're going to get from the mechanics of the systems that you have put in place in your business or in your relationship are going to look wildly different than if the energetic field is filled up with I'm already abundant, or I'm already provided for, or service, or love, or the big vision of the feelings of the big vision that brings to us as if it's already done. So if you shift the energetic field, then you have this ability to quantum leaps. Again, quantum leap does not come from hustle, does not come from working harder and working more hours and sort of killing yourself, if you would, in the process. It actually comes from shifting the energy, perhaps doing some of the similar things you would be doing, but getting wildly different results.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of people I've heard, I'm quantum leaping, I'm quantum leaping. And it's almost like entrepreneurs have an addiction to kind of gambling on things. So whenever they're gambling, they're haphazardly doing things, but then a few things start to work out. Because you can always have that, where a few bets will, if you're gambling, a few bets will start working out. So they're almost riding that energy, a false sense, and they think they're quantum leaping. But really, they're just displaying the same old patterns.
Yes. Okay. So I'll give you a little bit that might actually determine someone listening to this. They're like, I thought I was quantum leaping, or I think I'm quantum leaping. One of the things that I teach this framework that I'll just briefly mention, at least the first step of it, of how you can quantum leap. Because when I look back at the past decade of my life, I have legitimately had these quantum leaps, both in my personal life and in my business. And I have what I call now just a completely unreasonable life that I get to live, right? And it's not just from a business perspective, but even personally. A lot has happened over the past decade. But when I look back over the past decade, there are always some things that in the areas where I have had a quantum leap have been a commonality. And I've broken it down over the years into 4 steps. But the very first step is having an unreasonable vision for your business, for your life relationship, right? It's completely unreasonable. And this is the part I want to kind of focus on, because it's unreasonable for the version of us as an entrepreneur right now in this moment. Right? Me sitting here, my next vision is just totally unreasonable. I think most entrepreneurs, probably most of your listeners, are going to be like, I got that. I probably have a few bullet points or maybe a few pages of how I want to live my life and what this exit is going to look like, or what this business is going to look like. So there's typically no challenge in that with this particular audience. But here's the criteria for what is considered an unreasonable vision that can create a quantum leap. Most people will set SMART goals, right? They'll go SMART vision. So SMART vision is like, all right, is measurable, realistic, is timely. And so it's all the things that you are already. By definition, you already know how to do it. Then you can set inspired goals where you're like, I have a vision. I don't know how to do it. I've never done it, but I can figure it out. I can listen to this podcast, learn something. I can call Nona. I can get a coaching. I can YouTube it, something like that, right? And then there's a third kind of vision that you could have. And this is what I call an unreasonable vision. And this particular one, it has two criteria. One criteria is that, one, you have no idea how to get there. It's not something you can YouTube. It's not something you can ask ChatGPT about. Just have absolutely no idea how to get there. And then number two is that it's so big that it activates a part of your ego, a part of your subconscious mind that says you can't do that. That's impossible. No one's ever done it. Who do you think you are? And the reason this is important is, and this will help some of the listeners that are listening and going, is this a quantum leap, or did I just took a bunch of risk and one of them took, right? So the criteria for the unreasonable vision is that you have no idea how to get there, and it activates a piece of your ego that says you can't do this. And when you're in this space, it's going to require you to evolve into the next version of yourself to be able to make that happen. It requires a different version of you, a different your identity. I mean, for example, I talk to business owners all the time, small business owners, entrepreneurs, and they go, I want to be the CEO. I want to create more freedom. I want to work less. I want to make more money. And I go, you can't, because your identity is hooked on being a small business owner. You do not know me creates the personality, the habits, the energetics of a CEO that has the ability to make the certain decisions to make that happen. So it's almost like working from the end, starting with the end in mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to get into, because I feel like this leads right into your 7 principles. And I know you have a free course on this. And I encourage everybody, we'll have this in the show notes right now people can go to your Instagram. It's free to do it. It's free to look at this. It Nona, this is your name. And then your last name is Djavid. And of course, we'll have that in the show notes for everyone's. But I want to get into these 7 principles because I think it kind of gives, vision was one of them that you just mentioned. It kind of gives us a process, and we all like these practical steps, or 7 this, or 20 this. Can we outline these 7 principles? I know they're energy, love, inspiration, vision, alignment, truth, and empowerment. But whenever I think of energy, I don't go into like love and inspiration and vision. Whenever I'm thinking of like energy, I just have to hustle and get it done and do it. And I don't want to do this. I need to work on this Excel sheet. I'm just going to do it, and I'll spend the 2 hours. What is that not wanting to do something, you do it anyways? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we just do that all day long.
Yeah. I'm going to make it super practical. The 7 principles are laid out like you described them beautifully here. But I think to make it even more practical, because you're like, well, yeah, I know what I got to do, but maybe on days I'm not motivated, or how do I shift my energy and things like that. And this is actually the 4 steps of the quantum leap that play into the 7 things that the book lays out. So since we already talked about the very first one, which is having an unreasonable vision, the second piece of it sort of answers your question or your comment. The second step in the process is actually expanding your identity. So you are the version of yourself who may not procrastinate, right? You are yourself who is the CEO. You're the version of yourself who makes quick decisions, takes the risk, takes the action. So that becomes the second step in the process. So
that's more than a vision board.
Way more. That this is like, there's so many studies around this. They just did a study out of Harvard on future self, where they had 2 groups of people, and they gave them both education about financials and financial intelligence. Like, this is what you do. You put it in your 401k, whatever they taught them in terms of finances. And 2 groups of people both got the education. One group, on top of the education, got to face an AI version of themselves in the future. So they get to themselves in the future as they were getting the education. And the other group was just the control group. And they did a follow-up study with them, a long-term study, and they went back and they looked at the two groups. And the group that had made more, significantly more smarter and better financial decisions that were based on the education that they had gotten was the group that faced their future self on daily basis, generating AI. There's tons of studies around this, around self-concept and possibilities of self. So, the idea that we have about our future self determines what kinds of actions we actually take right now. So this process of a quantum leap is, okay, I have a vision. I know where I'm headed with my company, with my life. But in the second step is you have to become that possible self version of yourself that can do that. So in this process, you're being intentional about the traits that you're going to get to express more of, and also the traits that you're not going to do as much, right? Because we've picked up these traits of hyper-identity that protect us over time, and they only carry us to a certain level of success and a certain level of joy in life. So to experience and expand that, we have to expand the identity intentionally in the direction.
Because, a lot of times people will use affirmations or visualization, and then they do that while they're drinking their coffee, and then they hop on their computer and there's 32 Slack messages that they got to answer and 86 emails. So then all that goes out the window. What they just did for, 10 minutes or 15 minutes is all gone. How do you practice this on a daily basis? I know you have a community, and we'll put that in the show notes. Is it alleviate?
It's elevate.
Elevate.
Play on word. Yeah. So sorry.
Yeah.
Play on spelling.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's like a lowercase e and then all caps LIV and then ATE. And that's just having a supportive community, connecting, and then having, that gives you clarity and momentum. I get that with your community. But when you're looking at affirmations and visualization, we always want to segment that. Like I said, maybe with my cup of coffee, and this is what I'm going to do. But then we do real world. Do you see what I'm saying? Like our spiritual part is over here, and then we do the real world. We go to church and then real life.
Totally.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I use this example all the time. I remember I would do hour-long meditation visualization, hour and 15 minutes every morning, like 4:00. And I would do my meditations, and I felt so good about myself. It was like something I would check off the box. And then by the time I have 2 little kids, by the time my kids would wake up and they come to bed and then breakfast and, get them out of the house to go to school, I was already in my stressed out, in a hurry, trying to get them out of the house and all of those things. So I realized while I was zenned out for that hour, that wasn't really working. I wasn't really showing up as that version of myself throughout this process. So it takes a lot more practice on the daily basis. It actually takes practice of, for example, I tell people it has nothing to do with how much you meditate and visualize. It has to do with who shows up to answer the emails. Like if you're not present enough and you're intentional enough to shift your energy and embody the next version of yourself before you answer an email, before you clean up your inbox, before you get on a Zoom call or on a podcast or something like that. Who are you that shows up to this podcast versus unintentionally? That becomes the spirit. That is, I believe that's the most important spiritual practice, is to actually live, present enough in the moment, or at least before tasks, where you bring yourself back into the version of yourself you'd like to show up as.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I heard a spiritual guru a long time ago say, you're super spiritual until you go to a family Thanksgiving dinner. So when you get around family, then it's all the triggers hit. So I like the spiritual concepts, the energy alignment but what I really like about your approach is you kind of have this holistic method that addresses the scientific side of things too. And you talk about goal setting and behavioral psychology. Can we get into that? How do you combine the spiritual concepts with the scientific approaches?
I think there's no way to separate them. I think they're the same. How we show up in life has to do with our nervous system and how safe we feel. So the actions that we're taking have to do with who we are and our identity. And I'm super thankful because my background in neurology from Berkeley, and then in chiropractic school, when I was in chiropractic school, it's real. Most people don't know this. They think they go to chiropractor for back pain and neck pain, but it's actually the study of the nervous system because it sits right inside of your spine. It goes from your brain all the way down and into all of your organs. So the way that we are innately designed is that the nervous system runs everything. Your heartbeat, your digestion, you and I chat, all of this is ran by the nervous system, and which part of it is the brain, right? So if my nervous system feels unsafe at the next level life that I would like to manifest or bring about or experience, then it is going to generate situations and it's going to become more in alignment with situations that are going to sabotage me back to where I have been, what is familiar, what my nervous system feels familiar. Not to mention, there's a chemical addiction to the emotions that we have experienced. So stress comes with a certain number of neurotransmitters and hormones. Guilt comes with a whole set of neurotransmitters and hormones. So this chemical addiction that we have to the emotions that we have experienced in the past that make us feel safe, they make us more prone to having those experiences again. But if I'm prone to stressed out, that's what I've experienced because my parents were stressed out and now I'm stressed out. Now I'm stressing out my kids. Well, I'm more likely to bring that about and express more of that. So now I have to unhook from that addiction emotionally, neurologically, and then create safety and create a whole new sort of quote unquote addiction to a new way of doing things. And, in these circles, we hear studies around how certain parts of your brain light up when you do the thing, but also the same parts will light up when you think about doing the thing. Okay, take that into that's literal neurology. And if you take that into like Pavlov's dog, right? It's the ring the bell, there's saliva. You give the cookie, ring the bell, there's saliva. You ring the bell, you have the cookie, there's saliva. Now you ring the bell, no cookie, there is saliva. Those neurons have literally wired together. Now, if you look at how that plays out in the woo-woo world, well, okay, if I have this really big unreasonable vision for my life, but my nervous system is more for stressed out, overwhelmed, and struggle, right? Then I'm going to it's just, we're not going to make it. There's more times I'm going to be stressed out and overwhelmed than I'm going to feel abundance and joy. So part of this process from a neurological, psychological perspective is to give safety to my nervous system from the result perspective. So what does that vision look like? Give it some sensations, write it all out. And I have a process that I teach. But once you have that, then give it to your nervous system over and over and over again. Engage your limbic system. So feel the emotions of that next level life that you would like to experience. And then now we have safety around the next level. Now you're not going to self-sabotage. You're not going to procrastinate. Now your identity has already shifted in your mind's eye. And so because identity drives your behavior, you behave differently. So now you are actual CEO in this current situation. You're more likely to move in that direction and take your business to the exit that you like or multiply or scale or whatever.
Yeah, that's so good. I know there's a lot of common obstacles, limiting beliefs, fear of change, lack of clarity. That's a big one. I hear the C word all the time, clarity. What obstacles do people face? I know there's these, but when they're making the quantum leap, and then specifically, how does the community that you have, Elevate, how does that help with that?
Yeah. I think what you listed here in terms of the obstacles, absolutely. I think I don't know what I want. Or I think 9.9 out of 10 times, people know what they want, but they're too afraid to claim it because here, now I'm going to have to go for it. And if I fail, now that I know, now that I've claimed that I'm clear on my vision, now I'm responsible. So, there's lack of safety in that. I'm going to fail and I'm not going to make it. But I think all of those are really common. I always tell people that, if you have 3 things you'd like to experience in life or in your business, start with those 3 things and just build around it. What would that give you? What would that make you feel? How would that contribute out to the world or into your family? That's where some people get stuck. And then I think also people get stuck in the embodiment, like what we just talked about. When you answer your emails, they get kind of go back to the emotional addictions of stressed out and struggle, and they don't go back into the frequency of the future version of themselves that brings more joy. And I think That's exactly why I started the Elevate community, because prior to this, Elevate community it's like a passion project for me, because prior to this, I had a mastermind and still have a mastermind for business owners. And I would teach them sales, marketing, funnels, the systems that it takes to be successful. And then what I noticed was, wait a second, there are two business owners. They're doing the exact same things I'm teaching. One is getting just massive, crazy results. The other one's absolutely stuck. What's the difference? And I realized, wait a second, it's not the mindset, because they both went to Tony Robbins and did the things and all of that. It had nothing to do with that. They had the information. And when it came down to mindset, what they were missing in this process was the energetic piece of it. So I actually started Elevate Club for those members. And I was like, hey, we're going to start a community. We're not going to talk business strategy, anything like that. We're going to talk, how do you approach what's the energetics of living an unreasonably juicy life, business, relationship. And of course, you can't just talk about business without addressing love, relationship, connection with yourself, with your higher self. So we kind of combine health, right? All of those things went hand in hand. So in that community is where I share the things that I have learned and I'm learning along the way with my community. And then we have, this culture where everybody kind of sticks with this unreasonable vision. You're surrounded by really inspiring individuals. And we have things in place, coaching calls and things in this container that are helping people quantumly.
I love the stark contrast you just said, because there's a lot of business owners listening to this right now. And it's like, yeah, I've read all the marketing books. I've read all the funnels, like you said. I mean, that's a perfect example. And, don't work on the business, work in the business, vice versa, whatever. All of these different things, system mindset, which those things are great. But you're saying, what's the energy behind the system, or how are you as an individual? Because you mentioned health. Like, are you eating shitty food? Are you not working out? Are you bouncing from one thing to the next? Are you in, stress constantly? Is that what you're talking about? I want to go into detail with these two people, because I think this is great. And then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think yes to all of that. I mean, your energy is going to determine whether you're going to take care of your body, your identity, and your energy and an embodiment of that identity is going to determine if you're going to go to the gym, if you're going to eat healthy, and all of those things. And a good example of this is when I had my second pivotal moment, where the dark night of the soul, I already had a near 7-figure business. And when I made a decision to do things differently and show up differently and tap into all the things we're talking about right now, when I made that decision, immediately after, within a year, I had a part-time 7-figure practice and business. Then after that, I opened up 3 other businesses that were semi-passive, multiple 7 figures. Then more recently, I got inspired to collapse even more time and create a 1-week-a-month lifestyle in my business. And that's sort of what I teach. But the mechanics and the strategies were not going to take me here. None of the strategies, I mean, it doesn't mean I'm not using those strategies in my businesses. I am using them. But the strategies alone would have taken me decades and decades to where I'm at, where with the right energetics, it's almost like having the right ingredients, the right energetics, the right embodiment of the next version of myself, I was able to collapse time and create the life that I desire, bring it closer. And then, of course, there's always a next level of contribution, of love.
Yeah, because this explains to the business owner why they're trying to do all the things, but nothing is working.
Yes.
And they're like, I get this all the time. They're like, Jason, I've tried everything. I've read all the books. It's not for lack of effort,
Oh, yeah, I know. And I've been there, and almost every entrepreneur has been there.
It's crazy. So I want to kind of leave. How can they, obviously they can be a part of your community, Dr. Nona. How can somebody, a practical little thing they can just start right now, being in the present moment, whatever it may be, what does that look like specifically if we wanted to help someone out right now?
I think the most important thing that anyone can do, and I talk about this ad nauseum, is having a vision. Now, if you're listening to this and you have 3 bullet points, you're like, I don't know.
Mission and vision statement or something, yeah.
I mean, not even, like, more practical than that. If you're in business, and you're like, I want to have a $3 million business, or I want to have $100 million exit, or like whatever that number is, just jot it down. If there's a certain way you want to live, maybe you want to travel 1 week a month or whatever, just jot that down. Maybe you want a mountain house or a beach house, just jot that down. Like start there, 3 to 5 things. If you don't have anything, jot it down and then expand on it. Okay, what does a $3 million lifestyle or business give me? And what does this make me feel? And what are the things that I can do? And how can I give back? And what's the level of contribution I would have at that level, right? So start to just kind of jot down a couple of paragraphs under each of the bullet points. Now, if you have a vision already, you're the entrepreneur that's like, I'm doing all of these things and this is where I'm headed, then I suggest you include some sensory input in there. So when you are there in the house, when you do close your business or exit your business, when you have a big sale, when you open up the next location, whatever that might look like, then what are the things you're feeling? What do you hear? What do you see? So give all of that and in my opinion, strongly write it all out. You do that. And then, of course, the next step is to go back to it as often as you possibly can. You can edit, you can expand, or you can just read through and feel it and make sure you have a smile on your face when you're doing it. Just by doing that, you're making it safe for your nervous system to get.
Yeah, that's incredible. I want to thank you, Dr. Nona, for sharing your wisdom and inspiring us, taking those practical tips. I'm going to do that when we get off this episode, but for helping people elevate their lives. I know that's your true passion. And the Elevate program, I think a lot of listeners that are listening to this, especially leaders, when they understand kind of, I don't want to be mean here, but I'm going to be really blunt. It's like you're causing all the problems. And once you kind of realize that, and like there's a higher self, and that higher self, there's so much more, that's something that we've all had to work on. It's like that, those limiting beliefs you got from your parents, aren't shit compared to what your higher self actually is willing and able, if you can communicate with it, to give you with all the abundance. And I think that's what you teach. Your book teaches that, Elevate Your Life. And I want to encourage everybody to go to your Instagram. And on that Instagram, you're offering out something for free for them. So that's great. Thank you, Dr. Nona.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my favorite way of getting in touch with people is just like a personal connect. So if you send me a message on Instagram, you say, hey, Jason, I was listening to Jason's podcast or I was watching this. I'll be happy to send over a 90-minute training that I have on quantum leaps. Obviously, we didn't have enough time to go over all of it, but I think that would be really valuable. And as long as you mention Jason's name, it's absolutely free.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Nona. Appreciate it.
Thank you.